Journey to the Center of the Earth Condensed Version. The Mysterious Parchment. On the afternoon of May 24th, 1863, sunlight slanted through the window shutters of the mineralogy cabinet in Christianhav, Copenhagen, slicing the room into alternating patterns of light and shadow. Professor Otto Lidenbrock, renowned for both his geological research and his irascible temperament, was examining an Icelandic parchment recently acquired from Copenhagen's antiquities market with his magnifying glass. His young nephew Axel, a newly graduated geological assistant, was listlessly organizing rows of labeled rock specimens. "What kind of infernal scribbling is this?" the professor suddenly roared, causing the specimen jars on the bookshelves to rattle. The twisted runic characters on the parchment writhed across the yellowed vellum like a nest of serpents. Despite being an expert in ancient scripts, the professor now resembled a schoolboy confronting a difficult problem, his red nose nearly touching the parchment. Axel offered a glass of cold water. "Uncle, perhaps it's merely a medieval monk's prank." "A prank?" The professor snatched the glass and drained it, ink stains from his beard nearly dripping onto the precious document. "This bears the handwriting of Arne Saknussemm, the famous 12th century Icelandic scholar. I studied his manuscripts at Göttingen University." He suddenly grabbed a quill and began scribbling calculations, oblivious to the ink splattering his immaculately laundered shirt. By 9 o'clock that evening, the fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers. The professor still labored at his desk, spectacles slipping down his nose, his white hair standing in wild tufts. As Axel yawned, preparing to retire for the evening, the professor suddenly jumped up as if electrocuted, the parchment fluttering to the floor. "Axel, come quickly." The professor's voice trembled with excitement. The young man picked up the parchment, and by the flickering candlelight, the mysterious symbols seemed to come alive. Tilting the document at a 45-degree angle toward the light, the professor read aloud. "Bold traveler, descend into the crater of Sneffels Jökull through the Jökulsárlón Glacier, which the shadow of Skartaris touches before the calends of July, and you will reach the center of the earth." I have done this. Arne Saknussemm, the center of the earth. Axel felt a chill run down his spine. "Uncle, that's impossible. The earth's core is molten magma. No living creature could survive there." The professor slammed his fist on the table, spilling ink in a black fan-shaped pattern across the surface. "Impossible? Science will prove otherwise." Saknussemm was the greatest explorer of the 16th century. His records have never been proven false. We must verify this discovery. His blue eyes sparkled with fanatical light, as if already glimpsing the secrets of the planetary interior. Icelandic Expedition. The steam whistle of Copenhagen's central station pierced the morning mist on June 1st. Axel, burdened with a heavy geological toolkit, followed his hurrying uncle. As he watched the professor embrace warmly the colleagues from the Royal Academy who had come to see him off, Axel felt a growing sense of foreboding. 3 days earlier, when the professor had announced his expedition plans, the entire Copenhagen academic community had erupted in controversy, with supporters and skeptics engaging in fierce debate in the pages of the Copenhagen Post. "Stop looking so glum, boy." The professor clapped him on the shoulder with such force that Axel staggered. "This will be the greatest expedition in human history. When we return, every university in Europe will throw open its doors to us." After 7 days of rough sea voyage, they disembarked at Reykjavik harbor. The volcanic ash-covered town seemed to have awakened from some primeval slumber, its low wooden houses topped with thick turf roofs trembling in the bitter northern wind. The professor headed directly to the largest bookstore, bargaining fluently in Danish to purchase every available book and map on Icelandic geology. "We need a guide," the professor announced, scanning the port square where Icelanders in woolen cloaks mingled. A tall, swarthy Icelander stepped forward, his blue eyes as clear as glacial lakes. "I am Hans Bjelk," he said with a slight bow, his accent bearing a strong Norwegian inflection. "I know every volcano in Iceland, including Sneffels." He extended a rough hand, its surface crisscrossed with calluses from years of ice axe work. Hans's eyes widened when the professor unfolded the map of Mount Sneffels by candlelight. Jökulsárlón Glacier? He pointed to a depression on the volcano's western flank. The crevasses there are bottomless. 3 shepherds fell in last year and were never seen again. The professor's finger struck the map forcefully. Precisely there. Saknussemm's directions cannot be wrong. He removed an elegant brass instrument from his trunk. This is the latest barometer, capable of precise altitude measurements. And this, he lifted a glass tube filled with mercury, a thermometer to record temperature variations in each layer of the Earth's interior. At dawn on July 1st, as the first sunlight touched the snow-capped summit of Mount Sneffels, the 3 men stood at the edge of the Jökulsárlón Glacier. The professor broke off a piece of ice and popped it into his mouth, smacking his lips in approval. Perfectly pure glacial ice, formed 10,000 years ago. Meanwhile, Hans inspected the ropes and climbing gear with steady efficiency, seemingly indifferent to the dangers ahead. Descent into the crater, the gigantic crevasse in the glacier gaped like a giant's mouth, shimmering with an eerie blue light in the sunlight. The professor leaned over the edge, shivering in the cold air, at least 50 feet deep. A perfect entrance. He rubbed his hands with delight, regarding the yawning abyss not as a death trap, but as a lecture platform at the Royal Academy. Hans secured a 150-foot hemp rope to a massive boulder nearby, attaching a leather pouch filled with stones to the end. "First we lower the equipment," he said in concise Icelandic, beginning to tie the geological hammer, specimen cases, canvas tent, and food tins to the rope. Meanwhile, the professor busied himself with the compass, muttering, 10 degrees 20 minutes east longitude, 65 degrees 31 minutes north latitude, exactly as Saknussemm recorded. When the sun reached its zenith, the professor descended first. His movements were surprisingly agile, his blue coat fluttering like a flag in the wind. Axel watched his uncle's diminishing figure disappear into darkness, sweat beading on his palms. Hans patted his shoulder. "Do not fear, young sir. In Iceland, we believe the brave receive the Earth's protection." The descent proved smoother than anticipated. Volcanic ash on the rock walls had formed natural footholds, requiring minimal strain on the rope. Half an hour later, Axel's feet finally touched solid ground. He lit his lantern, revealing a circular platform approximately 30 feet in diameter, its walls lined with hexagonal basalt columns resembling a giant's organ pipes. "Look at this." The professor struck the wall with his geological hammer, dislodging a piece of black rock. "Perfect columnar jointing. Proof this volcano formed during the Tertiary period." He pulled out his notebook and sketched rapidly. "We're now 120 feet below sea level, and the temperature," he checked the thermometer, "is 15 degrees Celsius, cooler than the surface." Over the next 10 days, they continued descending through the winding volcanic passage. The professor insisted on recording data daily. July 5th, depth 850 feet, temperature 17.5 degrees. July 8th, depth 1,500 feet, temperature 20 degrees. These figures excited him increasingly. The temperature rises much slower than calculated. The Earth's core isn't molten magma, but a vast hollow chamber. On the morning of July 12th, as they finished their last compressed biscuit, the sound of running water echoed from ahead. Hans extinguished his lantern instantly, and the 3 men listened in darkness. "An underground river," whispered the professor, "the Stygian stream mentioned by Saknussemm." Relighting his lantern, its beam revealed a 10-foot-wide underground river with crystal-clear water flowing over beds of glittering quartz sand. "We need to build a raft," Hans stated calmly, beginning to examine available timber. The professor knelt by the riverbank, sipping water from a beaker. Mineral-rich heavy water. Tastes rather like Copenhagen's mineral springs. He recorded observations enthusiastically, oblivious to Axel's pale face. Their food supplies had dwindled to 3 days' rations. The Subterranean Ocean, the raft, constructed from pine wood found in the volcanic passage and covered with the professor's waterproof canvas, was finally completed on the morning of July 15th. Hans shaped oars from tree trunks using a basalt axe, while the professor assembled a makeshift navigation device from a compass and hourglass. According to Saknussemm's account, this underground river flows into a vast subterranean ocean. The professor announced from the raft's bow, standing like a ship's captain. "We'll need 3 days to cross, so we must conserve water and provisions." He divided the last remaining biscuits and tins into 3 equal portions, each carefully wrapped in oilcloth. The raft glided into darkness, the lantern's light casting trembling reflections on the water. The rock walls gradually receded, and strange echoes reverberated through the void, as if countless eyes watched them from the blackness. The professor tapped the raft's side with his geological hammer. The echo lasted for a full 30 seconds. "At least 5 miles wide," he calculated excitedly. "This is an inland sea." At noon on the third day, while Axel recorded water temperatures, Hans suddenly pressed his finger to his lips. "Listen," he whispered. A strange hissing sound drifted from the distance, like 1,000 serpents hissing simultaneously. The professor quickly redirected the lantern beam, which pierced the darkness to reveal an incredible sight. A flock of prehistoric pterodactyls with 15-foot wingspans flying overhead, their leathery wings cutting strange arcs through the air. Mesozoic pterosaurs. The professor's voice trembled with excitement. They should have gone extinct 65 million years ago. He frantically retrieved his sketchbook, his pencil dancing across the page as he tried to capture the prehistoric creature's forms. Suddenly, the pterosaurs panicked and scattered into the distance. "What's happening?" Axel clutched the raft's edge, his heart racing. Hans pointed forward where the water had begun churning violently, a gigantic shadow moving beneath the surface. The professor's pupils dilated with terror, a plesiosaur, at least 40 feet long. He quickly took out a rifle from his pack. Exhibited at the 1857 Paris Exposition, effective range 200 yards. Axel felt his blood freeze when the enormous head emerged from the water. The plesiosaur's eyes glowed like lanterns, cold and reptilian, its long neck swaying sinuously above the surface. The professor fired without hesitation, the gunshot echoing through the cavernous space. The bullet struck the creature's neck, and dark green blood spurted forth, staining the surrounding water. The plesiosaur emitted a deafening roar, its enormous tail thrashing the water and raising huge waves that nearly capsized the raft. "Row for your lives," Hans shouted, his oars churning the water furiously. The raft shot forward like an arrow as the wounded plesiosaur thrashed in agony behind them, creating turbulent waves. When the monster's form finally disappeared into darkness, all 3 collapsed on the raft, gasping for breath. The professor's spectacles sat askew, but his face wore a radiant smile. "We are the first modern humans to see living dinosaurs. This discovery will shake the world." The volcanic eruption at dawn on July 20th. The raft finally reached the opposite shore of the Subterranean Ocean. When Axel stepped onto the beach, the sand crunched strangely beneath his boots. The professor grabbed a handful of sand and rubbed it between his fingers, pure silica, vitrified by underground heat. He suddenly jumped up, pointing to an opening in the distant rock wall. "Look there." Saknussemm's mark. On a massive basalt boulder, a clear engraving in the shape of an S stood out clearly, the initial of Saknussemm's name. The professor embraced Axel enthusiastically, covering his nephew's face with salt-crusted beard stubble. "We've done it. Proven the great explorer told the truth." Beyond the narrow passage, light suddenly appeared. Proceeding cautiously, they found themselves in a vast volcanic chamber whose walls were lined with glowing crystals that illuminated the space like daylight. The ground was covered in thick volcanic ash that preserved their footprints perfectly. "The temperature is rising," Axel noted, watching the thermometer's mercury climb to 35 degrees Celsius, 5 degrees higher than an hour ago. The professor remained entranced by their surroundings, breaking off a crystal with his hammer that refracted rainbow colors in the light. At least 50 carats. A perfect quartz crystal. Without warning, the entire cavern began to shake violently, and crystals rained down from the walls. Volcanic eruption, Hans shouted, pointing to a smoking vent where magma now flowed like red rivers. The professor's face turned ashen. We must escape immediately. The magma will block all exits. The three men ran in the opposite direction of the lava flow, their boots burning on the hot volcanic ash. Axel smelled his leather footwear beginning to singe when the professor's coat suddenly ignited from flying sparks. Axel extinguished the flames, but discovered his uncle's arm was badly burned. "Hold on," he shouted, binding the wound with a damp cloth. The passage grew increasingly steep, with loose gravel cascading beneath their feet. Suddenly Hans cried out and fell backward. Axel grabbed his collar just in time, discovering the guide's leg pinned beneath a huge stone. The professor attacked the stone with his geological hammer without hesitation, sparks flying as the rock finally cracked. Quickly, the professor seized Hans's arm, and together they pulled the injured guide free. By now, magma filled the passage floor, and superheated steam made breathing nearly impossible. The professor pointed upward to a patch of light. "The exit. We're almost there." When they emerged from the crater, they found themselves standing on the summit of Stromboli volcano. Mediterranean sunlight blinded them, and in the distance, fishing boats dotted the sea. The professor checked his pocket watch, trembling with excitement. August 31st. We spent exactly 2 months underground. The return. When the professor and Axel appeared at Copenhagen Central Station on September 10th, 1863, the entire city erupted in excitement. Reporters from the Copenhagen Post swarmed them, their cameras flashing incessantly. Though his beard had turned white and his clothes were still stained with volcanic ash, the professor's blue eyes shone with triumph on the lecture platform of the Royal Academy. The professor displayed their discoveries: specimen jars filled with Italian volcanic ash, fragments of basalt bearing Saknussemm's engraving, and the luminous crystal collected from the subterranean ocean. When he unveiled his pterodactyl sketches, the hall erupted in astonishment. "This is humanity's greatest expedition," the professor declared, holding his geological hammer aloft. "We have proven the Earth's interior contains a vast hollow chamber preserving prehistoric life." The audience erupted in applause, and even the most skeptical scholars were forced to admit that Professor Lidenbrock had accomplished the impossible. That evening at their Christian Have home, the professor studied a world map, tracing a route from Iceland to Italy with his finger. "Next time," he murmured, "we shall explore Kilimanjaro in Africa. Its volcanic passages may lead even deeper into the Earth's interior." Axel watched his uncle's feverish silhouette and sighed softly. Opening his drawer, he took out the parchment that had changed their lives. By candlelight, Saknussemm's signature seemed to glow faintly. The young man suddenly realized some secrets perhaps should remain buried. Yet humanity's desire to explore the unknown, like magma deep within the earth, would never be extinguished as the hearth fire dwindled to embers. Moonlight through the window illuminated the specimen jars on the bookshelf. The rocks from the Earth's interior glowed mysteriously in the darkness, as if whispering an endless story that would never truly end.